Hello, everybody. Welcome to the second part of my conversation with Josh Mcilroy. In this second part, we're gonna focus on the topic of fair play and go a little bit into depth and also explore some fringe topics around that main issue. And I hope you will enjoy it. I had a blast. And if you stay till the end, you'll even find us disagreeing on something for the first time. So stay tuned, and without any further ado, let's get into the show. So, in this second part of the conversation, we're going to focus on fair play in dodgeball. I just think fair play is such an important part of this game, and when I think of fair play over the last decade of dodgeball, I think of Northern Ireland, and that's why I really wanted to talk to you guys, and especially you, Josh, because I think as a captain, as a coach, and just someone who's been there for the last 10 years and been really involved in the community and also the dodgeball side of things, you are probably one of the people really not just responsible for it, but like someone who's lived this for 10 years. And before, when I said people really root for you guys, I think this is a big part because you've been at the top level for the last 4 years. You've been the champions for a few years now, and you've been really dominating, at least in the men's, which is something that lots of people tend to get envious, and then you start to lose your like crowd favoritism, but you still got it because I think the same way you played 10 years ago or 5 years ago, you still win and lose the same way. And the way you handle yourself on the court and off the court is just something that the dodgeball community and I personally as well really respect. And I think the games against you guys always are quite my favorite games because this is purely dodgeball. And it's always been that way since I can remember in France, it was the same way in three ball dodgeball, where it was like there was no shouting, there was emotions, there was big competitiveness. Everyone wants to win, but in such an fair and just honorable way, in my opinion. And I think that is dodgeball at its best. And I don't even think it's just a great thing about dodgeball. I think it's the basis for good dodgeball. And if you've seen the semifinals and the finals and dodgeball at the highest level, I think at this World Cup, it was really a great showcase for that. Because in the cloth, I'm just talking about cloth because the other division and the foam stuff I didn't see as much. It was really amazing to see that the level of fair play and just honesty by every player was incredible. I didn't feel anything in those 3, 4 matches where I felt like, maybe someone's playing unfair in any way, sort of form. And that is really the first time that's really been a feeling I had throughout all those games. And that was just just perfect for me. I just enjoyed that so much, and it really fills my soul with pride because that is something we really watched from you guys. We learned from you guys. We learned it from the dodgeball scene in general, but that is something I think is really going to be important for the sport to move on as well. And the reason I really wanted to talk about this is because, first of all, like there were lots of new nations at this World Cup that haven't played at that level, that haven't played in that community, that have been there for the first time. And I think sometimes it was really difficult for them to adapt to it because I don't know how they play in their leagues, and I don't know how the rules, how the fair play situation and everything is in their home countries. So I don't even fault them for playing the way they play because I come from a handball background, and in other sports like in handball, like using the rules to your advantage is a tactical thing. And so I'm just going to leave it at that and let you join in and just tell me a little bit about the Northern Ireland perspective on why fair play is important, or what you think about fair play, and what's sort of your personal standpoint.
Yeah. Okay. Well. Firstly, thanks for the glowing sort of recommendation of NI. that fills me with pride. But I'll not sort of put a halo on my head or claim to be any sort of you know the person who created fair play, because since I've started dodgeball, that was very much instilled from probably Brew Cousins, who came over. He was the original NI coach whenever I first started, and it was very very clear from Brew, that the standard is that we will not cheat, and that is a moral that we've always stuck by, and it's kind of a in the NI league itself, because we play in quite a small league, it's quite close knit. You're playing against the same people uh, pretty much every month, so you really do get to know each other, and it's a really fair league. It's really really open and honest, and you could almost referee it yourself. You could just say, look, yeah, I hit you there, and someone would go, yeah, no bother, and they'd walk off the court. Where dodgeball is tricky as a wider sport is that when you're competitive and when you want to win, and anyone who's going to commit as much time as you need to be anywhere near a champion, in any league, be it a League One in England, or a League Cup winner in your home nation, um, you're gonna be really really competitive, and sometimes that competitive nature can see the likes of other sports and say, well, I can see that sport's taking advantage of that rule uh, in dodgeball. Why would I not do this, because it has such an impact? But I personally agree with you that I can't see how dodgeball progresses without it being played fairly, because when you watch it a game, and as you said, I genuinely think the standard has got better every single year, because I think the last World Cup was really really good, where there was no incidents that jump out to me at all, which is fantastic. That's what you always want to hear, and you know it can't be a sport that will progress to an Olympic level because without playing fairly, because a referee has no way of being able to see if a hit is so tight or close. Sometimes it does just take a player to be open and honest and say, yeah, that one's grazed me, but you'll not hit me the next time. Um, the I feel for referees. I've done the referee course. I know it's so difficult to do it, and that's why there are five of them. You don't normally get that many on such a small court. You wouldn't typically have so many referees. There's no way that we can progress it from okay, let's start looking at technology or using footage to see if it's a hit or not. Like that's too slow. And dodgeballs get so much of the sort of appeal of dodgeballs. It's fast paced, and people want to see really spectacular play. So it is something that just needs to start to be developed even further, and that's from every nation's perspective, and I included in that. Um, Competitive wise, I would say that I suppose casting the die back to when I first started. NI League was really good. There wasn't really that much cheating. I went over to my first tournament in England, and I have to say it was pretty poor. Just the type of quality or the type of cheating that was going on was just very blatant, to be honest. And the thing is, it's not, and I want to be clear on this, it's not the majority. It's one or two bad eggs that cause the likes of this to happen. So, and I do think that's because it's been talked about more and it's more an open conversation. You're seeing less and less of it. So the English leagues now are much much better than when I first started playing dodgeball 10 years ago. But tactically, you kind of touched upon it, and I'd be interested to hear your point of view on this as well. You know, I am one to look for, okay, well, how can we use a situation to an advantage within the rules? Because that's everyone's playing in the same playing field. Then, for example, I'm sure, I don't know if you guys use this or not. We don't really, because we don't like it. But the mop, for example, I'm sure every nation was thinking, the mop. Either some people love it because it's a bit of fun, and what I'm referring to here when I say the mop is whenever a player sweats on the court, they bring in or pause the game and bring in a mop. But what that allows a team to do is then make tactical decisions, or to make an advanced call, or to do something to slow down the play, to break up a flow. So that's an example of where, you know, it's a rule that it's unwritten. Technically, yeah, you could call for a mob every time you hit the floor, and that's fair enough. So be it. Um, it's the it's the kind of blatant cheating where somebody, or unfairness, unfair play, where someone sort of knows they've been hit. That's the kind of play that's just disappointing. And I really hope we see less of it in Dodgeball, and we continue to see less and less of it, because there's nothing worse than sort of thinking back over a really, really intense game and sort of thinking two or three really key moments that didn't go your way, whenever you can see in a footage or something that someone has been hit. But it's difficult to know where does that line come between, you know, in NI we set basically, I suppose, three key rules. You call yourself out if you're hit, so you walk, and that is non-negotiable. If you know you're hit, you walk. Only that player can do it. So unfortunately, there will be times when they try to dodge, or they hit the floor and something happens. They don't know if it bounced. So the second rule is then, if you don't know and you think you've been hit, you ask the ref. And the third thing then that overarches all this is, as a teammate, if you're in the outbox, or if you're retrieving, or if you're in the stands and you see something that involves being hit or lining or whatever, then you tell the player. And then it's up to, you know, as a squad, we do this, you know, together. We've made a conscious effort to approach Dodgeball in this fashion. And that's certainly the NI perspective. But yeah, be interested to hear sort of from the Austrian side, because obviously I always think that the majority of nations we play now are really, really honest. And Austria, I think, have been a very honest nation. You know, the whole time I've played against them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you raised many really good points, and I 100% agree with pretty much every single one of them. I also talked a lot with Brew about that throughout the last few international tournaments as well. So I know he's basically like the godfather of the fair play movement, or at least in my head he is. So shout out to Brew. But I think you pointed out a really important thing, and I think that's one where we are really alike as well. It's the small community. If you have a small community and you play each other every weekend, and you are friends and you compete and you are all competitive, but you also party and go out together and stuff, then cheating becomes something so toxic that the community, if it's somewhat a good community, will just get rid of on its own. So, and I think that's the way it happened for Austria, because we didn't come to it that consciously, because we were all handballers, or a lot of us, and their cheating is like a part of the game. And it doesn't mean that you cheat the rules, but like the rules are quite unclear on what is a foul, what is body
Yes.
stuff. And so it's like there is more of a gray area, and if you don't use it, you lose a big advantage. So coming from that point of view, and also like from soccer or something like that, where the ref has the final say, I often heard the argument, and still hear it from some nations and some players, that it's the ref's job to call a hit. If the ref doesn't call a hit, then it's no hit. And that's something that I have a really, really big problem with, for many reasons, because in dodgeball, that's just not how the game works. If you rely on the ref calling every hit, then you don't have a game. Then you have something that I call ref bingo, because we've all been there, we've all played it. You can't distinguish hits from blocks from bounces. Sometimes you can, and you get a feeler for it. The better you are at it, the better your eyes are, and the more experience you have, the better you're gonna get. Go be at that. But we all had that situation where someone threw at us, we blocked it, we didn't feel anything, and the ref said that was a hit. And that is basically, for me, the worst feeling in dodgeball. Like, if the ref has to make a decision, because otherwise he doesn't feel the game is played honestly. And if the ref has to make those decisions, the game is done. Then the game doesn't work anymore, because it's up to the ref's discretion, and that is something you just can't call with a high percentage all the time. So sometimes it needs to happen. So that's why we have five refs. If you step on the line, you don't see it. If the ball bounces and you turn away, then it's important to ask the ref. and sometimes even your opponents. And I think in small leagues like ours, that's a really great thing. So I talked to this along with my guys and also with like Alex Harrison, where and I think in the Northern Ireland game it happened once for me where I was dodging two balls and I
Yes,
was
I
looking at the
remember.
floor and one ball clearly hit me and I felt it, but I didn't know if it bounced or if it did hit me straight. And I just looked at Calvin and was like, "Did that hit me?" And he said, "Yes, it did." And I was like, "Fair." Then I walk out.
Yeah,
And I think that is a great thing to have. And I think at the highest level, we played each other that many times that we have that understanding and the trust. And if you have that, amazing. But that is something we can aspire to. And I think it's a great part about the game. And I think it might be something we can try to also install in the game that you're like, if you ask your opponent and he gives you an answer, you don't have to take it for anything, but you can do that. And then it's up to you to whether you trust him or not. Because what we can't have in dodgeball and which is something we still have a lot is finger pointing and people yelling because they think they hit someone or because they think they saw something. And I've seen so many situations, and I know you have as well, where like there was a bounce and a catch and a catch and a block, and you thought in your head, I saw the whole situation and I'm 100% sure it happened this way. And everyone has their idea about it. Then a decision is made and you watch it back on film and you're like,
yes,
oops,
yes,
fuck. It was
yeah,
completely different. So I've been in that situation often enough that I'm like, I'm not going to call anything. If the ref thinks he saw it, great. That's his job. And sometimes he's going to see stuff and sometimes he's not going to see stuff. But there are situations that are just so random and so complicated and so complex that you're not going to see it. But I think, and I'm going to be interested in how you feel about this. I think you always feel if a ball touches you. If it touches like the bands of your shoes or like the smallest part of your kit or your hairs, you always feel it. In my opinion,
yeah.
I think there was no ball
I
ever thrown at me that hit me that I didn't feel. That's just what I'm
yeah,
gonna say.
I
Sometimes you don't know
completely
if
agree.
it bounced 1 centimeter before your foot, or you feel like I think there are some things that are up for debate, and I'm not 100% sure about that. And I think if that's the case, then it's fine to leave it up to the ref's discretion. And some people are gonna err on the side where they think it hit them and they're gonna go out anyways. And some people are gonna say, I'm gonna stay in because I don't know. And I think both of that is completely fine. I have nothing against it. If you don't know, if you are not 100% sure it hit you, then it's fine for me to ask for the ref's opinion or your teammate's opinion. 100% with you.
I completely agree because you can't have a game, a high level competitive game where every single time a ball, I block a ball cleanly and one other ball that's come from across court, the far side has actually bounced off the floor, come up and hit me in the foot. If you're going to stop every time and then say, okay, yeah, I'll go out for that.
Yeah,
You don't have a game of dodgeball then
yeah,
either. So there is that fine line. But I completely agree with you on your point around if a ball hits you, you know,
yeah.
you know, you feel it graze your
100%.
arm, you feel it clip the back of the shirt, you could maybe have a moment, and I do think every player will have had this, a little moment where you went, that nicked me, and you have a moment where your body will say, did anyone see that? And my sort of challenge will always be, it's not about walking when you're winning 20-0
Yeah,
for those. It's about walking whenever it's 13-all and
yeah,
it's an overtime set.
yeah,
That's the moment to me that really sets someone who's willing to play honestly. Like for example, like, and this isn't to try and blow smoke up my own ass or anything like that, but I'm actually talking about losing a league. So there you go. It kind of brings me down to reality or whatever. But I've lost a league where in the last few seconds I've been clipped in the shirt and nobody's even saw it, and you've said, right, yeah, that's clipped me, and you lose in this the split second after when the rest whistles blown. So that's the moment I think that really makes someone, a really really honest player and a player that would, a player that I would buy a pint for anywhere.
absolutely. I love that. Exactly. That's. I think every dodgeball play. I think there's two situations. The one situation is where you thought you blocked the ball, and you're like, it takes you 1 second to realize that that ball actually hit you, and it just it just takes the time for your brain to process what just happened, because your brain was already like, I blocked that, I dodged it, and then it just grazes
Hmm.
you, and you take 2 seconds to be like, fuck, I was out, I was hit. That, I think
Yeah,
that's something I sometimes experience. And the second thing is, I think a really important thing is exactly as you said. It doesn't matter if you're in, no, it makes no difference when the thing happens. And if you're up 20 points, if you're down 20 points, and especially if it decides something, those are the moments I'm really proud of Dodgeball if I see something like that happen. I
yeah,
mean, then
yeah. I agree.
I'm even more proud of my opponent than for myself of winning the game. I think the best thing that happens if you throw a ball and you're like, damn it, I missed it so close. I missed it. And he just walks off and you're like, wow, bravo.
Yeah, yeah.
That's when that happens, I'm like, okay, that is something I respect so much. It happened against you guys a few times in the semifinal, where like I think it was once Johnny where he just fell down and we felt like we threw 3 balls at him and they all missed by 2 centimeters and he just walks off, and we're like, okay, that is just such high class. And that is one thing I really want to point out about the US team as well. This is something I saw
Hmm.
from them as well, and that is something for a team. I mean, they play dodgeball for a long time, but not at the cloth side. So that was just really impressive that we saw that kind of level of honesty from them as well. And I just want to shout that out, because that is something that brings me a lot of pride and joy. And that is something I had to learn myself, because there is this little egomaniac inside your head that's like, no one saw that, even in
There
training. I
is.
mean, it
I,
doesn't matter at
I
what point I'm
completely
that.
agree with that.
Yeah, I'm so competitive and I want to win and I want to stay in. If something grazes my shirt, I'm like, damn it. In my whole body tries for a second to be like, no one saw that. And then my
And
brain has to take over, and I'm like, no, you go out. And that is something that I had to like really enforce on myself, because it doesn't come naturally. I think of
that
myself
I agree.
as a
That
very
that's human
fair
nature.
player. Yeah. And I think so as well. So I completely agree that it's the toughest thing to do in those situations, because you feel also like you're not just letting yourself down, you're letting your team down if you go out because you just got nicked by the shirt. And was it really that bad of a hit if it just nicked me? But those are the moments that define honesty for me. And that is something I really try to instill in all our young players as well. So I see it a lot with our youth players. They're like 12, they're 13, 14. And at that time, you just don't want to lose. And so it's really, you see the progress when you teach them and you incentivize them, but you also punish them. And I think that brings me to my next point, is like, what do you think is like a good balance for the sport, where you say like, I think the most important thing is to build it up from the ground up, that every league, every player that has played dodgeball for a while and has some sort of say in the whole thing is, in my opinion, someone who needs to put a lot of emphasis on this point for everyone around him. I talked to Alex about it, because as you said, in a little league it's easy because we see each other every week and we have time to
Hmm.
like educate each other that this is not behavior that's gonna fly here. But if you see each other every few months, if you play players that you haven't spoken to ever and will never
If
do,
you just don't like the
if
players
you
you're
just don't
playing
like them,
against,
absolutely.
because
So
that
there are
happens
lots of,
sometimes.
absolutely, there are lots of variations on that. I think it becomes much easier, and then you can tell yourself it's the ref's it's the ref's job to call you, and if I don't, it wasn't a hit. And I think it's really on the old guys and girls who've been in this for a longer time to help their players develop that kind of honesty and fair play. And as you said, those 3 pillars of honest play and fair play, I think are great, because I also say you have to get out if you get hit. And I think the thing you said about the outbox also helping the refs is a fair thing, because some people say, that's not your job, and it isn't on a in that moment. But I think for the whole dodgeball world, it is your job. And if someone steps on the
Hmm.
line and the ref didn't see it, it's your job to call them out, because it just is a fact that you did that infringement. And I think it sucks to see it on video afterwards that you stepped on the line and it should have been out and stuff. It just leaves a sour taste in your mouth. And so I think if I wouldn't go that far that you say like I think it hit you and go out, that's not a
I
good thing
agree.
as well. So I think the competitiveness is something that is still really important. There are some sports where I played at university where they were so about fair play that they tried to congratulate the other players for a good play, that they tried to punish themselves for everything. And if you take fair play to be the most important thing, then it loses all competitiveness. I don't like that. So
Yes.
I think
Yes.
honest competitiveness and respect for your opponent and knowing if you hit him, he's going to go out. And if he hits you, you're going to go out. If you have that sort of unspoken contract, then you can really play dodgeball. And it leaves a lot left for the refs to do because dodgeball to ref is incredibly hard. And for those rare cases where they need to intrude, sort of, we need them, but we need to make the job easier for them because if they feel the obligation to call hits, then the game is lost. So
Yeah.
I this is
Yeah.
sort of really a shout out for everyone and an appel to everyone. Really try to focus on this because I think if we want to go everywhere, anywhere as a sport, we really need to emphasize that. And now there is no money involved. There is nothing involved. We're just playing for fun and like the little bit of recognition in our small bubble. So it doesn't do anything. It doesn't hurt you except for your ego. And I think that's a quite healthy thing to do from time to time. But if we gonna think farther ahead, 10 years from now, and maybe there's money involved. Like in the US, there are tournaments where it's about a lot of money. And then it gets really tough. And I think if we don't instill those values now, then we are lost. And then we need VAR or something like this to enforce it. And I think at some point we're going to need some sort of that anyways, because as you said, it's human nature. And if there's more on the line and it's the last set and this is whether you win something or not, then you're going to think more than once about stepping out.
Yeah.
Agree?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a fair point because I've had it before actually where uh, before and I won anything, obviously family and stuff watch, and I remember my dad actually specifically saying to me, he said, you know, why are you walking every time a ball is grazing you? Like you don't see that, and other teams are staying in for it at times, so you're not going to win anything if you just keep doing this. And there was a point genuinely when after 3 or 4 years of playing dodgeball and sort of not really getting to into the big sort of group of players, I suppose, that you do start to think, well, maybe we won't get any further here without bending the rules. But all I can say is, NI and Austria and other nations have proven that it can be done. And as you say, the next thing is where I view this is how do we get the sport towards the Olympics? It's going to be tricky because, as we say, there's no way VAR or a technology assistant could be used on every other play. So it might work in a challenge system, and it's about trying to build that right ethos now and the standard and the expectation of what the sport can be, because that's a legacy we can have on it. Because unfortunately, I think it'll come after certainly mine and your time, Stefan, but maybe for someone listening who knows they may be playing at some point in the future in the Olympics, I hope. And I just hope that dodgeball at that point really showcases just how honest a sport it is, even though it's played at an incredibly high and professional level.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's beautiful. I think that brings me to the next point, like how do we incentivize that? And I think the EDF has done quite a good job with like the protests and also the punishment after the fact. I think it's important, like in the game, you can do VAR at the moment. There may be some opportunities in the future, and I think I have a few ideas about that as well, but that's not for today. But I think the really important step, the first step we took was that we have really high quality streams. And we have, if we have
Yeah,
those, then I think it really disincentivizes people to cheat. At least, obviously, there's still gonna be those little nicks that you just can't see. And yeah, I just think that's just says everything. If you can do that, then heads off to you. I think you're doing an amazing job, and I'm very proud of you. And I know it's not easy. It's not easy for me either. So, but I think at least the blatant cheating and the the cheating that happens more than once is something that we just have to punish out of our sport. And I think it's the only way. And I think we already saw that happening at this World Cup, that like the fruits from the last few happenings. And I think that is something that we just have to do on league level, European level, world level as well. And that is something that WDF has to do as well, because they don't have that rule as of yet. So at the World Cup, basically, you could cheat, and there were some nations that are just not used to that kind of fair play spirit, I'd say. And I don't even fault it, because if you haven't been raised in that bubble, it's as a competitive player, I think it's something natural, and I don't fault them. We talk to those
Hmm.
players because sometimes it was just for us, it was like so surprising that it happened in such an obvious way that I was like, at the first minute, I was just shocked and completely was like, what is happening here? Then it happened again, and I was for the first time really angry, and I felt it in myself, and I tried to basically yeah, hit him in a place where it hurts. And and the steam was off after that. But it was something that I felt at that moment. I'm really passionate about this, and I felt how this can destroy the game. Just if someone just doesn't adhere by the values we as a community put out there, that it just completely destroys the game. And that is something I really think it's worth fighting for. And so I personally, I'm a big fan of punishing afterwards. But that brings me to another point, and you raised that before as well. Like I think the site is called Dodgeball Cheats or something. There's a YouTube or Instagram
Something like that.
site.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so where they upload videos of people cheating or maybe not cheating. So, just what's your
Yeah.
perspective on that?
I think my perspective on that is, look, I don't like that. I don't really care if the person has cheated as an individual, and then someone goes and takes a snippet and puts it up. Uh, Fair enough. That's fine. I suppose they get called out, and ultimately probably puts them off cheating in the future. But that could have serious sort of repercussions on the individual, and they probably get quite a lot of online abuse from that. So I definitely don't agree with sort of posting videos, and I sort of started to see as well a little bit of um, videos taken out of context where people sort of were starting to post things against some players where maybe during the phase they've moved to the side and the ball's come bounced off the floor or maybe hit them on the shin. It's difficult to tell, but say in the video it's hit them on the shin and then it cuts off because they haven't left the court. But maybe what you don't see 5 seconds later is that they've asked the ref and then they exit the court. So there is this, the videos can be sort of manipulated in a way to portray something. I sort of think I just don't really agree with that because I think it just leads down a bit of an unregulated road and can kind of lead to childishness as well between people. If they don't get on together, then they might say, "Oh, I'm going to go and find a video of a moment where I line, for example, and don't realize and stay on the court and sort of call out with a nasty comment." So that would be my opinion on that. I'd be interested to hear your perspective after. But I did want to touch upon your point around punishing retrospectively. So I don't think there's any way to do it differently. But I do think a retrospective punishment, in some regards, leaves a pretty sour taste in the mouth of whoever's played and can have a very big impact. So, obviously, as I said, at the World Cup, we were really lucky. All the teams we played actually were very honest. And if we had have played a team that had have maybe cheated a couple of times, left a few players in at key moments, snuck a player on the court, came in the wrong order on purpose, those little things, and ended up knocking us out. That's arguably 5 years of work and effort and putting your body through it and the energy you're putting into it all gone. So a retrospective punishment I find probably the only way, but I don't know if I love it just against the individual who cheated because, and this is probably my argument, I would argue more to punish the individual, yes, but also the team because I think that's a culture that
Yes.
needs to be developed within the team. Because the first thing that'll stop a teammate cheating is their friend saying to them, "You're going to cost us points. You're going to cost us, position in a pot, or even if for a very extreme circumstance, ability to play in future tournaments or something. That'll be the thing that gets someone to stop if they are known for kind of pushing the boundaries.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you raised lots of really good points. So I'm gonna try to remember them all and give my perspective as well. So the first thing you said, those videos are a really double-edged sword, in my opinion. So I think they are really effective because I I mean we've seen the videos that have been around, and I think we know all, like in this modern day, what an impact a video can have if it's out of context and stuff. So it's a really dangerous game, and I think it does not stand for it. So basically, I think it's really effective, and I don't think there is anything else at the moment we can do that is that effective as a deterrent, basically. And but I think it's extremely important that those videos are handled on an individual basis, case by case basis, that all sides to the situation are looked at and have a spot to defend themselves and explain themselves. And I think there is in the European Dodgeball Federation there is a committee that is responsible for that kind of thing. And I think that is a great thing because that is very professional. That gives the player the opportunity to defend themselves, gives the opportunity to the nation as well. And I think the point you raised is the most important point. It's important to, in some sort of way, punish or deter players from doing that kind of stuff, especially if it's intentional and doesn't happen just once. So I think there probably is a video about every dodgeball player out there where he didn't go
Yeah, I'm
out,
sure.
where he has been hit, or where there was a situation where no one was really sure what happened, and afterwards you're like, I'm pretty sure what happened. And I think those kinds of things, as you said, are really important to handle as a community. So I'm really also a fan of punishing the community and the team and the nation or the club or whatever, and really incentivize the whole community to raise their standards and tell everyone who's joining that program what their standards are, what they stand for, and what dodgeball is all about. And if it happens, and if it happens once, you get a warning, you get a talking to, you can explain your perspective, and then if you fool me once or twice or three times, then consequences have to be made. And I think those consequences should be as harsh as possible because, as I said, I think it's the most important thing in our sport to get rid of on a player individual basis. So as you said, the videos, I'm not happy about them because I watched a lot of those videos, and at least half of them, or I would say probably 70-80%, if you really watch them closely, you see that there are two sides to this video. And there is almost always an argument to be made for the player who has cheated in that situation that he probably didn't do it on purpose. Sometimes there is no argument to be made. And there are some hits that people just don't go out. And I saw that at Worlds, which was really a little bit shocking for me. But again, that is a moment. If you see something like that, you go and talk to that player, and you go and talk to that club, and you go and talk to that community, because that is your job to raise awareness. And if it happens again, maybe you give them a second chance. And after that, you punish them, and you punish them as severe as possible, in my opinion, because everyone gets a second chance, everyone gets a chance to learn. Because, as we said, we had to learn ourselves. But as a community, as a sport, as I think the whole European and world federation, we have grown so much that people should know. If they've been there at these events more than once, they should know that this is an important part to instill in their federation as well, and that is just your job, and that should be communicated from the top down and from the bottom up. So I think we're on the same page here. And I've talked to Alex Harrison I think a year ago or something, and he said that it's like really hard, for example, for England sometimes because they have such a big community, and like also the pressure on every individual player to make the team, to make the cut, to show how good
Yeah.
they are at every league is just something else and something that we don't experience on a regular basis. So it's that much harder for them to live up to that standards, and I absolutely get that. And i I think still, and I think we've seen it over the last years, that they've made huge improvements. And at
Yeah,
this World
definitely.
Cup, I have nothing to say about that. That was amazing, and really congratulations to you guys. It has to be said, you did an amazing job as far as I saw it. And I think that's a really big step in the right direction. And for whole for big countries such as the US or Australia or something like that, it's a much bigger animal to fight. But the more the sport progresses, the more tough it's going to get for every one of us. And I think now is the time to really start it and keep those values up at every level. And again, punishment is probably necessary.
Yeah, I could completely understand the perspective from a training side. You're especially for the likes of the massive player pool countries. But the only sort of argument I'd have is, in training, if a player is sort of cheating in training or in his local leagues, um, either they go to the national stage and suddenly they massively underperform, in which case as a coach in one of those national teams you'd be saying, why are we selecting this player? Um, or I kind of think that really it's the training ground is where all these sort of cultures should be taught. And sort of if you are cheating to try to get in, or sort of feel the pressure so much that you're kind of pushing the boundaries and the rules, you'll get found out in the long grass, because all that it will do is improve you as a player. If you go out, it'll be tough, and as you say, it's not nice. Nobody wants to go out. That's the whole point of dodgeball,
Yeah,
not to exit the court. But ultimately, it will make you a better player in the long term. If you miss out on an international selection because you've been honest, all I could say to you is that at least you could be proud of yourself, because I'm sure there will be people who listen to this podcast and think, I think they're being a little bit naive from a competitive sporting background. But I would honestly say that if you can walk out with your head held high, knowing that you've done all you can to try to play as fairly as possible, I can guarantee that you'll be a better player for it as well.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a great point because yeah, I think also it's like the argument that it's kind of naive to think that way is I get that. I mean, I absolutely get that, and I get the other side as well, but I just don't see another way how the sport can succeed. That's my point. If we have like cameras and AI that always says when you're out and you're like in fencing or something, there's a beep when you're hit, fair, then I'm fine with it. But it's going to be a long way till we are there. And until then, if the sport wants to succeed at a high level and be spectator friendly and be a great community still, then we just have to keep our focus on that. And if we get the other stuff as well, it's going to be even better. So yeah, as you said, I think be careful the way you communicate as well if you think someone is cheating, because as we said before, it's not easy to tell. And there are so many
Yeah.
situations, and I think I've learned that as well, where you're like, I surely hit you. And I'm like, I'm 100% sure I hit you. And then I watch the video and I'm like, I can't tell. I can't tell. There's just, was it a block? Did it graze you? Did it go 1 centimeter away? It's no one can tell except for that person. And if I tell you, I hit you, then the next time it's grazing you, maybe your motivation to go out isn't that high anymore. So I think it starts with you, with every player, to like look at themselves and look at their ego and really just look at yourself. Don't care what your opponents do, care about what you do and what your teammates do. And if you start there, I think it's just gonna go like a little avalanche and go into a big thing. And I think that is what we actually did as a community at the European stage and hopefully now at the world stage, where it like is such a community standard and you know that people respect it that much that you're incentivized. If you are a player who loves dodgeball and who loves to be part of this community, then you have to adhere to that standard. And if you do that, then you're gonna have the best time of your life. And so start with yourself, start with your teammates who are maybe struggling still, because it's not easy. It's not easy, and for some people, it's even harder. So help them and really get their mindset straight, because you're doing everyone and your teammates, especially, a really big, big solid. Because no one wants to be the player who everyone thinks that you're a cheater. It's a, as I said, we're not winning money, we're not winning anything at this point. So what you want to do is be at the after party and people like you and want to talk to you about stuff. And if you don't have that, I don't know what you have in this sport, because success is great. And I can now come from a perspective where I've pretty much won everything that you can win in this sport. And I still tell you the best thing about the sport, apart from winning, that is great and I love it. But if I wouldn't have the after parties and the friends and the community and like talking to you guys and have this camaraderie across the whole world, I wouldn't be doing this still. I would have moved on to something else. So the competitive part is a great part of this game, but without the community, it's nothing, in my opinion. So yeah, that's just I think
Yeah, well said. Well
yeah,
said. Yeah, I completely agree. From someone who's in theory won it all. I'd say the only thing we haven't won is the World Cup with NI, but I'll count it because we got it with GB. But
that
uh, I completely agree that it, it is the most crucial thing is the wider community that dodgeball has, the friends that you get along the way, and the level of sport and how spectacular the sport is to play is down to those people in it.
absolutely.
So yeah, completely agree.
Ah, perfect. I think that would almost be a perfect ending, but I still have two things. Like the first one, you mentioned it before, was the mob, and I have to give my 2 cents because that's honestly something I haven't even thought that deep about, but that's something I actually had in my mind. And I think in a part that's a tactical thing. Like I play for 40 minutes basically when I play a semi-final or a final, and I'm too old for this shit now. So if I get a break, who the mob was one of my best friends at this tournament. And in the back of my head, I was like, if I need it and I can't breathe anymore, I wouldn't do it to break up a game or something, but I would do it probably to just get myself half a minute to rest. And I think that's obviously not in the spirit of fair play. So that's an infringement on that. I personally, that's what I just found out now, have not that big of a problem with that, because honestly, it's something that's not completely in the spirit of fair play, but it's still something that's not without the rules. So I think cheating is stated in the rules. If you do that, then you're doing something that's not allowed. The mob is something what I call the gray area. And I think sometimes that's just smart. That's not beautiful. I'm not proud of that, but I think those kind of rules I'm fine with. If you say I'm a competitive person and I see a little edge and I take it, I applaud you if you don't do that. I absolutely applaud that. I'm not that big of a person, apparently.
No,
I think I didn't need to, but it was in my head, and I told Basti when he was completely broken, if you need a break, slide. So,
slide. Yeah. No,
yeah,
I completely understand that is, and I would agree. No, I don't like the mop. That's
yeah,
just me personally. I find it breaks up the game and all that.
absolutely.
But I completely agree with the sentiment or the sentiment that like we aren't angels here. We aren't sort of preaching to everyone to say, you need to always be perfect like us. What I would say is, I if I know it's not right to do in terms of the rules say this, then I don't do that.
Yeah.
But completely agree. If there's a way to get an edge in a game that's within the rules that maybe isn't everyone's favorite thing, then so be it, because that is sport. And if a rule comes out then to change that and says you shouldn't be doing this, that's fine. Then it stops. But with every sport and with every competitive thing, you'll have to find the edge because the margins are so small now that that's maybe what you need to do. As I said in our part one, I fully believe that US team beats us if they start to slow down the play, use the mop, slide in the floor, break it up so we can't get any momentum, any flow into the game, build anything. I think they hold that 12-0 win or 12-0 halftime score. So completely agree with what you said there. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool, yeah. So we're not angels, and I think that's important for the listeners as well. I'm not saying be an angel. I'm not saying give your opponent a present and be so fair that it hurts your own team, but just be a player that adheres to the rules and be a player who sees to it that the team adheres to the rules. So I think that's all. And then we go to another point, which will be my last point for now, and which is also sort of in the fair play category, but also not, which is headshots. So, what do you think about headshots and also the rule that like sort of defends people from headshots?
Um, it's a funny one. So in NI, this is sort of again a long-winded answer, but I moved down to Dublin for a year. So we in our club scene at the time we had some of the Irish clubs playing in the Irish leagues. So I was working down in Dublin, so I'd moved from Queens and did a wee stint with Dublin, and we essentially won a league on throwing high, and it wasn't throwing at heads specifically. But it was back in three ball, and we threw high because no one could catch it high. Whereas everyone seemed to be able to catch it when it was at your ankles and on your tippy toes, and you think you've done the perfect throw, and somebody manages to pluck one off the ground, or they tend to go low. So there is a tactic in going high in dodgeball. Um, some of the best catchers, you you can guarantee that they probably like it more when you throw it square at their chest first, probably in preference, but they probably don't mind their knees and that sort of zone. They probably don't love the tip of their shoulder, just past their ear. Um, where I sort of feel like headshots probably aren't good is just you get beyond the ball return line into the far end of the neutral zone. I don't think you should be throwing a head height there. I think that's probably a zone where, you know, if you're hitting the face, I think ultimately that whether you meant to or not, it would be fair enough to receive a card. And I think that's probably the way the rules are meant to be interpreted now to try and protect players. Um, if someone's at the very back of the court and a ball comes and hits them in the head and you've aimed for it, I wouldn't be their best friend, but I also sort of take the line of, well, it's a competitive sport and that's just what happens if you're going to stand and take it in the, take a headshot, then you maybe should have moved faster. Is my harsh opinion that is only when you're at the back of the court and you've had time to read the play. You can see the ball coming at you. There's no kind of grey area. I think if you're up the court and somebody's countering you and decides to pull out your face because they're worried you might catch it, I don't love that. I think that's probably not particularly safe, more so than anything, especially whenever you see some of the throwers across the world at the last World Cup. I wouldn't fancy a close face shot.
Okay, that's good because finally, after 2 hours, we have something we disagree on. That is great.
Good. Okay.
Yeah, awesome. Because I would state the counter argument to that. First of all, I like headshots. I don't call them headshots. I call upper chest shots. So I try to hit the upper chest. I try to hit the shoulder sometimes, and sometimes I try to hit the head. And I think sort of that rule, I understand it. It's there to protect players. Absolutely. And that is fair enough. But I think the burden of protecting someone is on yourself in dodgeball. Dodgeball is a sport where you try to hit people out. And if you say that there is a zone where you can't hit people, then it brings a lot of nuance and a lot of gray area into that, and lots of, again, power to the refs and on the way how they see it and on the players as well. So if someone hits you and you like him and you respect him, you probably go like, fair enough. And if someone hits you in the head and he's someone you don't like, you're gonna tell
Yeah, you
him.
roll around or something,
Exactly.
or
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
So you're probably gonna tell them that that was bad intentioned, and you never know the intentions. And for me personally, there is, like, except for that one time where I was a little bit frustrated with someone who cheated a lot. Otherwise, it's never something personal or something like an aggressive thing, but it's something tactical. Because as you said, if, for example, Mr. Smurf is 2 meters away from me and his whole body is formed in a way that it's basically just a black hole where my ball is going to be sucked into, I have to make a decision. And the player is that good at catching that he decides even 2 meters away, he's going to take his chances and go for the catch. And that's his decision. And with that decision, he risks something. And that is always your decision. If you don't want to get hit in your head, and I personally don't like to get hit in the head, and I almost never do, because I don't go for those catches because I protect my head. And that's something where sometimes I don't make those catches, and that's something that limits me, but it protects myself. And I made that trade off for myself. But I don't like that in a sport where it's the aim to hit the other person, that you give the burden of protecting the person you're throwing at to the player whose aim is to hit a person. So, sort of in certain situation where it's really close, you basically give him the burden to protect his opponent, and that's just something that you can't really do. And if you try to do it, you're gonna give yourself a big disadvantage, although you are in a position where you have a big advantage and you've worked for that, and the other player risked something for that, so he traded his safety. And I think
Yeah, yeah.
there is a case for it made at the recreation level, probably at the youth level, like there is in soccer, where you say headers aren't allowed up to a certain age because maybe it damages the brain. But I think we've all got some good headshots. And I personally have never seen someone getting really hurt from it. That's just me personally. And I've dealt out a lot of headshots, a lot of close headshots as well. So I felt a lot of headshots as well. Like the best one was from my brother, where there was an exercise where he should throw at someone else and he just didn't listen. And I was expecting him to throw somewhere else, and I just look at him, and the ball lands really straight on my nose. And I have a big nose, and I can say that one stung for a little while, but I had a free nose for 2 days after that, which was great.
Y-
But
yeah.
that one hurt, and it hurts, really hurts in your face, and it also hurts in your pride. But I still think that's just something we are willing to do in our sport. In every sport, you take some risk, and if you do mountain biking, you take the risk of falling against a tree, and if you're boxing, you take the risk of brain damage, and in dodgeball, you take the risk of breaking a finger and taking a ball to your face. And
Yeah,
so,
so
until,
that's real. I'm
sorry,
really,
yeah, yeah. So it's
I'm
just,
really interested to hear
yeah,
that.
because so
I'll let you finish.
if you have really bad intentions and if you're trying to hit a person, and I think that's still up for the ref's discretion to say there were bad intention or there's something that is really dangerous. If Tamash throws at a 16-year-old French girl from 2 meters and purposefully hits her in the face, even though the game was 20-0, then I'm like, okay, probably not. That didn't happen. Sorry, I didn't want to bring Tamash into that, but that just was the
Yeah, so it was an
hardest
example
throw.
of a
Yeah, of
large,
a big hard
strong
throw. Yeah,
male.
so
Yes.
that never happened. But then I'm like, okay, that's not safe. But if I'm in a final and it's close and I'm one player down and I throw intentionally at someone's face who tries to intentionally catch me in that situation, then I'm 100% agreeing with that, because otherwise it just it's just brings a facet into the game which is really a slippery slope, and it hinders the game, in my opinion.
Okay. No, I'm really interested to hear that perspective, and I'm glad we disagreed on something. I would have felt bad if we came off the podcast and didn't sort of
Absolutely.
have some form of disagreement. I suppose with the headshot piece, I just think there's a really fine line between that kind of intentional space and a player who is maybe actually just completely being honest and trying not to get caught. You're speaking to someone who's been on the receiving end of that Murphy catch probably 1,000 times. Where you think you've got him up court because he's technically overcommitted. You've got into his space and you're thinking, brilliant, I can make the hit. Two things with it. I don't agree that a player, if they're in that scenario, who doesn't have the ball, should be able to advance towards an opponent. I think that puts both players at risk, and it makes the throwing angle really difficult because there's no way you can really get your arm to throw low enough at a body that's not their chest. I still don't agree with throwing a headshot at that angle. The rationale behind that is just um, I don't think anyone ever catches that. It would make headshot pretty much the priority. If you're catching someone up court, it would put players at risk. So I completely understand what you mean. How many people have actually suffered concussion or had a serious injury? But for example, like Adam Hill in one of our trainings, he's actually went partially uh, blind in one eye because a ball has clipped him the wrong way, and that wasn't from close range. So I just think there's, you know, I know that you say you accept the risk when you play, but when I look at other sports, some of the really competitive ones, rugby, football, I would make the argument there is an element of the other team has a duty to make sure that they aren't injuring the other player. I know you can make the argument that if I'm throwing at you from close range and decide to throw at your ankles or your fingers, uh, those could break. So there's always that risk element. But I think a face shot probably is beyond the line for me in that close range zone. But look, I can understand your argument to it in terms of uh, where do you draw the line to that? If I'm at the back of the court, if I'm backtracking, if I'm falling backwards and it hits me in the face, does that mean I'm fine? And I can I kind of like the rugby system of kind of mitigating factors, but I don't believe that if I've caught you up court and you've decided to stand there, you know, I I can think of a few players in the past who would have taken a really really good advantage of that rule, where they've maybe you're in the middle neutral zone, you're going at someone in the far corner who don't really see has managed to get a ball in from a retriever quickly and catches you up, and you spin round and they crook you
Yeah.
no distance in the face. Nah, that doesn't sit well with me,
Yeah,
that one.
true.
But I understand what you mean
Yeah.
by you would view that then as malicious, and that's where
Yeah.
you're trying to give the refs that little
Exactly.
bit of
Exactly.
yeah.
So I think you have to sort of protect players from malicious intent, definitely. And that's a fine line in itself because you can't look into players. But I think that's, as you said, in other sports that's done as well. Even in MMA, there are some things that you are not allowed to do because the risk is too high. So I think that's a fair point. The counter argument to that is like if I am close to a player in the neutral zone and he sees me coming and he's running away from it or deciding to stay there, then he has options. And to move the head is quite easy. So we have two problems there. There is one situation where he decides to just stand his ground and doesn't move and just goes for the catch, fully committed. And that's a situation where if I throw at his face, I hit him in the face. And it looks like I just hit him in the face from point
Yeah,
blank
yeah.
range. Same situation, the next player decides to, I'm really close, and in the last second, I'm gonna try to dodge low. And in that situation, I throw low at him at his knees and hit him in the head. So, which one is the worst thing? Because the thing is, with the first player, I don't know that he just stays there. I thought he might jump, and I wanted to throw at his chest. And I didn't want to throw at his chest because if he jumps, it's in his belly. So I think the deciding factor, because now it's judged that if you just stand there and don't protect yourself, then it's basically malicious intent because you just threw at his face and it was right there for you. If he just dodges low and you just happen to hit him on the face, then you couldn't do anything about it. Then it was bad luck. But the thing is, you don't know what the other player is gonna do. So basically, if a player decides to just stand there, then that I think is his decision, and that is where I think the burden of responsibility for his safety is in his court. If he tried everything to dodge the play, and for some reason it happens that someone from cross court runs up in his blind spot and is 2 meters away from him and yanks him in the side of the head from 2 meters, then I'm like, that's not okay, because there were a lot of different options for you. If someone doesn't see you, then I think what you said with Adam as well, headshots are always bad if you don't see him coming, and you mostly don't see him coming on the back line because it was a cross or you were somewhere else. In the front, you mostly see it coming, and those are the situations that are punished. And I think in those situations you have an option, and to move the head away or just turn it away is quite easy, and to protect your head with your hands is quite easy. And in those situations, if you don't protect yourself and say, I'm not protecting myself, the rule is protecting me and it's on you to not fuck up, then in my opinion that's not great. But again, malicious intent or something that is just like a red card because someone just slipped and hit a player even though it wasn't his intention, if it's such a dangerous play, then the ref has the discretion to punish that, and then I'm completely fine with it. Like in the neutral
Yeah.
zone, if you slip and break someone's ankle, that's a card, even though you didn't mean to do it. And the same thing with a headshot. If someone's not looking at you and you hit him from 2 meters in the face, I'm all for it. But if someone is looking at me and has options to move and decides to take his advantage, I'm not fine with that.
Hmm. Interesting perspective. What's your view on suicide, or leap of faith, so they called?
Yeah.
Um,
Honestly, I have mixed feelings. I personally don't like to do suicides anymore because um, I haven't played handball in a time and I'm not great at them. So I some people are really good at them, and I think it gives a certain aspect to the game and a certain special athletic and also exciting nuanced part to the game that I like them. And I think some people like the Swedes use them really well. So I'm quite a fan of them. The problem is always again player safety. So it's a tough situation. So if you ban them, you don't have that situation, which makes it much easier and safer for the sport. So I can see that argument, but I still think it's a fun thing to do, and I think it's a fun and watchable aspect of the sport. So personally, I'm for suicides, but I think on a suicide, the burden of protecting the opponent is on the player who suicides because you're entering their field without them
yeah,
wanting to do it, and I think that's a big difference. It's not the
yeah.
objective to
I
jump into your opponent and run into your opponent. It's your objective to hit him out. So I wouldn't punish hitting your opponent out if that was your objective and your only objective. But if you put someone in danger because you put your body where it doesn't belong, then it's absolutely on you.
Yeah, I agree, because I would sort of, the reason why I brought up suicides because of that player safety element kind of transfers across, and I kind of the opinion I would have is exactly the same. Suicides look brilliant. They're very fun. They get the crowd involved. They're very skillful as well to execute. Um, as a player who is receiving a suicide, I personally feel like you should not be limited in your area of the court from where you can dodge. So you should be allowed to use the full space. If they've jumped close enough to you that they are now going to land in your vicinity or touch you or put you at risk, I think that should be on the player who's attacking. So similar to what you've just said, I think I fully agree. I know there's debates that I've had with other players in the past who sort of said, no, if I'm once I've taken the air, you then can go anywhere, and then I've lost my control. So you could use that to an advantage, which I understand. But I sort of feel like on your side of the court, you should not be limited from where you can move. Um, so no, fair enough. Interesting from that. Um, Headshot side, we'll maybe agree to disagree on it. But
Fair
look,
enough.
who knows? Who knows? When you hit me in the face in the future, ask me how I feel about it then, and I'll maybe give you an answer.
Yeah, you can try it as well. So if you find me in the neutral zone unprotected, then I've done a lot of things wrong and I'm absolutely fine to
Yeah,
be hit
yeah.
in the head. So
You'll
that's
you'll
on
blame
me.
yourself.
Absolutely. So I get hit very seldom in the head, but that's because I make a point to not be too close to players when I don't have a ball in my hand. That's just something I like to do. So obviously, I'm more on the side of headshots because I really like them and I think they're a really important aspect of the game. And like I coach our women's and I coach them to do high shots because lots of people dodge slow shots. And as you said in the Irish League, high shots give you an advantage. And if you don't throw 100 kilometers per hour, even more so. So I think it's a fair part of the game, and I think it's really tough to limit it to certain areas. I still think player safety is utmost importance, and I think the ref's discretion there is absolutely well deserved and absolutely necessary. But I think I wouldn't do more than that because then there's always the situation where one ref says, nah, it was fine, and the next ref says that was unfair or that was unsafe. And again, that's not something where we want to. If someone hits you in the head and he goes out with a yellow card for that in a final, that's just such a tough
Has a
thing
big
to do.
impact.
That has such a big impact on something where I say, at the highest level, it's fair game. In other areas or other situations, I'm fine with putting the players' health and safety to a higher standard and say I limit the game because that is more important. But on the highest level, I think sports at the highest level is not always safe. And that is something you can protect yourself really well from. And if you don't, it's your decision. And if it's not your decision and it's still done by the opponent and it's sort of malicious or intentionally with the possibility of hurting you, then I'm all for punishing that. But if you see me coming
Yeah.
and you decide to stand your ground and put your head in the way, I'm not for that.
Yeah, see, I would sort of looking at rugby and the rule of, for example, if you're in the air, so if you jump up, and I don't know how familiar you are, Stefan, or the viewers with rugby, so I'll just quickly explain it. If you make if the ball's been kicked in the air and you're trying to catch it, you can jump into the air. If you're in the air, the opposing player has the right to challenge you by jumping into the air as well to catch the ball. They are not allowed to stand on the ground and try to touch the other opposition player because what that happens is sometimes they'll flip and they'll land on their neck and it creates an unsafe space for them. But I would sort of make the argument because both sets of players know that before they play the game, both sets of players are at the same disadvantage. And you'd make the argument that, for a spectator point of view, people love to see an up court catch as well. And if that player is good enough to be able to pull off a catch from 4 meters while looking at them, hats off. And you probably also say to the thrower, you shouldn't have thrown that there, or you should have thrown better. So that would be my
Yeah,
final little counterpoint.
absolutely.
But
Fair enough. Yeah. I totally get that. Still, I think I get the rugby analogy, but I still think the one thing is to keep them safe and put them on the same sort of playing area and say you both have the same disadvantages. But in this case, you hinder a player from doing their job basically for something where I would argue the other player could mitigate the safety much more easily in this case. But yeah,
yes,
it's
yeah,
fine that we disagree on that, and we'll see what the rules are going to be in the future. Um, yeah, but I think that was
yeah,
a
yeah,
really interesting conversation. I had a lot of fun. Again, it was 2.5 hours. I loved every minute of it, and I think we're going to do it again at some point. And yeah, Josh, any final
yeah.
parting words? Something you want to tell to your mama or
Um,
someone else?
Yeah, no. Look, just to say, it's been a pleasure. I really, really enjoyed being on, chatting with you and hearing your perspective. Something I've actually always wanted to do. Speak with you guys more, and certainly I'm looking forward just to seeing. Hopefully there'll be a couple of comments in the video as well, because I'd love to, or the podcast or YouTube, because I'd love to see what the community thinks about some of the topics we've covered. But that's it. The only thing I'd finish with then is just that we'll hopefully get you in Limerick.
Yeah, you'll definitely try, and I'm looking forward to it. So we both old guy. How old are you, Josh?
I'm 29.
Ah, you're still young. So we're gonna try to get our bodies in shape till Limerick. We've got some work to do, I think, but and then I
Hmm.
hope we're gonna have great games. Hopefully at the late stage in the tournament, and then we'll see who hits whom in the face.
That sounded like a good closing point.
So, everyone, thank you so much for listening to the second part of my conversation with Josh. I hope you got something out of it or enjoyed it at the least. I did. And until next time, keep throwing those balls, try not to get caught, and take care, everyone.